Welcome to the History AI podcast, where the past comes alive with facts, anecdotes, and a dash of humor. Here are your hosts, Chuck and Marco.
Hey everyone. Welcome back to the History AI podcast, where history comes alive, one story at a time. I'm Chuck.
And I'm Marco. Before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And if you enjoy what you hear today, please take a moment to give us a 5-star review. It really helps our podcast grow and reach more history fans like you.
Absolutely. Today, we're diving into one of the Civil War's bloodiest and most fascinating battles, the Battle of Shiloh. Buckle up, because this one's got it all: heroism, tragedy, and even a glowing mystery in the night.
That's right. We'll cover the key players, the brutal fighting, and the curious case of the Angel's Glow. Plus, we'll chat about how this battle changed the course of the war, and how it's remembered today.
Let's get started. The Battle of Shiloh unfolded in April 1862 in southwestern Tennessee, near a small church called Shiloh Meeting House. It wasn't just a clash of armies, it was a collision of ambitions and personalities that would help define the course of the war.
Let's set the stage. On the Union side, we had Major General Ulysses S. Grant, fresh from victories at Fort Henry and Fort Donelson earlier that spring. Grant was determined to seize the Confederate stronghold at Corinth, Mississippi, a key railroad hub that could split the South in two.
Grant's army, about 42,000 strong, was encamped at Pittsburgh Landing on the west bank of the Tennessee River. His men were mostly raw volunteers, some barely trained, many still green from their first taste of combat at Donelson. Grant's right-hand man was Major General William T. Sherman, commanding a division and known for his aggressive spirit. He'd soon make a name for himself across the South.
On the Confederate side, we had General Albert Sidney Johnston, considered one of the finest officers in the Confederacy. Jefferson Davis himself called him the ablest general he had. Johnston had a reputation for courage and was determined to strike a decisive blow before Union reinforcements could arrive.
Johnston's army, around 44,000 strong, had concentrated at Corinth. His second-in-command was General P.G.T. Beauregard, a familiar name from the war's earliest clash at Fort Sumter. Beauregard was known for his flair and showmanship, though his relationship with Johnston was sometimes strained. Two big egos in one army can make for interesting dynamics.
And let's not forget the broader context here. The Confederacy was on the defensive after losing Forts Henry and Donelson. Johnston knew he had to act fast to prevent Grant from linking up with reinforcements under General Don Carlos Buell, whose army was marching south to join Grant. If Buell and Grant combined their forces, the Confederates might lose control of western Tennessee, and the Mississippi Valley would be wide open.
So Johnston hatched a bold plan, a surprise attack on Grant's camp at dawn. If he could smash Grant's army before Buell arrived, he might change the entire momentum of the war in the West. It was a gamble, and as we'll see, the stakes couldn't have been higher.
Let's dive into the heart of the fighting. The Confederate assault kicked off at dawn on April 6, 1862. Johnston's army advanced in multiple lines through the early morning mist, catching the Union soldiers, many still making breakfast, completely by surprise.
The initial Confederate attack overwhelmed Sherman's division near a place called Shiloh Church. Sherman himself later admitted he hadn't expected an attack. His men were driven back in confusion, and the Confederate momentum threatened to roll right over Grant's entire army.
Throughout the morning, Confederate forces continued to push the Union troops north and west, toward the Tennessee River. The fighting was chaotic, with troops sometimes getting separated from their units, commanders struggling to maintain control, and both sides facing terrible confusion.
One of the most intense struggles happened at a place that would become legendary, the Hornet's Nest. This was a dense thicket of underbrush in the center of the Union line, where General Benjamin Prentiss and General W.H.L. Wallace formed a stubborn defensive stand. Confederate troops launched repeated assaults, only to be repelled by withering musket fire.
The Hornet's Nest held out for hours, some say 6 or 7, while the rest of the Union line bent under the pressure. Confederate artillery under General Ruggles massed dozens of cannons, some estimates say as many as 50 or 60, and bombarded the position. Eventually, Confederate infantry flanked the Hornet's Nest, forcing the survivors to surrender. Wallace was mortally wounded during the defense.
Meanwhile, on the Confederate side, General Albert Sidney Johnston personally led a charge near the Peach Orchard, Yes, there was an actual orchard in the middle of the battlefield, when he was struck by a bullet behind the knee. It severed an artery, and Johnston bled to death within minutes, his staff initially unaware of how serious the wound was. His death deprived the Confederates of their commander at a crucial moment.
After Johnston's death, General Beauregard took command. But by late afternoon, Confederate attacks had begun to lose steam. Grant, who had been rallying his scattered troops along the river bank, refused to retreat. He famously told Sherman, "We'll lick 'em tomorrow."
Overnight, Union reinforcements from Don Carlos Buell's Army of the Ohio began arriving, swelling Grant's ranks. At dawn on April 7th, Grant launched a counterattack. Fresh Union troops drove the exhausted Confederates back through the same woods they'd fought over the day before.
The Confederate army, battered and disorganized, ultimately withdrew toward Corinth. They left behind thousands of dead and wounded on the battlefield, one of the war's most horrific scenes. By the end of the battle, there were over 23,000 casualties, more than all previous American battles combined up to that point.
The sheer scale of the carnage shocked both North and South. What was supposed to be a short, glorious war had turned into a brutal, grinding conflict. And for Grant, Shiloh was a harsh lesson in the price of underestimating the enemy, and the power of perseverance. Now let's talk about the people, the heroes, the legends, and the very human stories that emerged from the chaos of Shiloh. This battle wasn't just generals moving pieces on a map, it was thousands of men fighting for their lives and for the future of their country.
On the Union side, one name towers above the rest: Ulysses S. Grant. Grant had set up his headquarters on the riverbank at Pittsburgh Landing, and when the Confederate attack crashed into his camp at dawn, he was miles away at Savannah, Tennessee, meeting with his commander, General Buell.
But Grant didn't panic. Despite the confusion and pressure, he rode back into the thick of the fighting and took charge. Mud splattered his uniform, and legend has it that he stood calm and stoic, smoking his trademark cigar while shells exploded around him. His resolve was unshaken.
William Tecumseh Sherman's performance at Shiloh was remarkable. Initially skeptical of a Confederate attack, some say he dismissed reports as skirmishes. Sherman was caught off guard when the Confederates slammed into his division. He was wounded twice, once in the hand and once in the shoulder, but he refused to leave the field. He rallied his men under intense fire and played a crucial role in holding the Union left. After the battle, he and Grant formed a bond that would last the rest of the war.
Another key figure was General Benjamin Prentiss, who, along with General W.H.L. Wallace, made the heroic stand at the Hornet's Nest. Prentiss men, some of them green farm boys from the Midwest, endured hours of savage fighting. One Union soldier later described the air as alive with lead. Prentiss refused to yield until they were surrounded and out of ammunition. When his line finally collapsed, he surrendered his remaining men. Though captured, his stand bought Grant precious time to stabilize the Union line.
On the Confederate side, the loss of Albert Sidney Johnston hit hard. A West Point graduate with a distinguished record in the Mexican War, Johnston was considered by Jefferson Davis to be the South's best general. As he led his men in a daring charge near the peach orchard, a bullet struck him behind the knee. He didn't even realize how serious it was until it was too late. He bled to death within minutes, dying in the arms of his aide. Some historians argue that if Johnston had lived, the Confederate attack might have succeeded.
Then there was the fiery cavalry commander, Nathan Bedford Forrest, who led a ferocious rearguard action during the Confederate retreat on the second day. Forrest's men were among the last to leave the field. At one point, he charged into a mass of Union troops almost alone. Some say he was shot in the side but kept fighting, earning a reputation for both courage and near-mad recklessness.
And let's not forget the thousands of ordinary soldiers, men like Private John W. Reed of the 21st Missouri, who wrote home about the horrors he'd seen. Or young Henry Morton Stanley, yes, the same man who would later ask, Dr. Livingston, I presume, in Africa, who fought with the Confederate Army and was captured at Shiloh, only to be paroled and later join the Union cause.
These are the stories that bring Shiloh to life. Not just strategy and tactics, but the men, leaders and foot soldiers alike, who fought and bled on that Tennessee field. They remind us that every battle is ultimately about people, and that the courage and sacrifice of those who served echo across the centuries.
Let's turn to one of the most haunting and mysterious aspects of the Battle of Shiloh, the so-called Angel's Glow. In the days following the battle, as darkness fell over the devastated landscape, wounded soldiers lay scattered across the cold, wet ground, many of them still where they had fallen, waiting for help that might never come.
Medics and stretcher bearers were overwhelmed. The sheer scale of the casualties meant many soldiers had to spend the night exposed to the elements, often in mud and shallow water. Some of these men noticed something strange happening in the darkness. Their wounds glowed with a faint, eerie, blue-green light.
At first, some soldiers were terrified. They thought it might be a sign of death, a ghostly harbinger of the afterlife. Others found comfort in it, believing it meant angels were watching over them, hence the name Angel's Glow.
For decades, the story passed into legend. But then, in the early 2000s, nearly 140 years later, a pair of curious high school students named Bill Martin and his friend Jonathan Curtis decided to investigate the phenomenon for a science fair project. One of their mothers happened to be a microbiologist, which helped them take a closer look at the possible causes.
What they found was fascinating. The culprit, it turns out, was a bioluminescent bacterium called Photorhabdus luminescens, carried by tiny parasitic nematodes that thrive in the warm, moist soil of the Tennessee battlefield. These nematodes infected the wounds of soldiers lying on the ground, and the bacteria they carried glowed faintly in the dark.
But here's the twist: Photorhabdus luminescens also produces natural antibiotics. In the filthy conditions of a Civil War battlefield, where gangrene and sepsis killed so many, the bacteria's infection may actually have saved lives by preventing more dangerous infections. In other words, the men whose wounds glowed might have had a better chance of survival.
That's incredible. Imagine lying there, bleeding and cold, staring at this glow in the night sky, and it turns out that the same phenomenon that scared or comforted you was actually helping you heal. It's one of those strange, almost magical intersections of nature and history.
And it's a reminder of how the smallest details, a microbe, a glow in the night, can change the course of a life. The angel's glow isn't just a battlefield curiosity, it's a testament to the resilience of the human body, and the mysteries that nature still holds for us. Let's talk about the aftermath, how Shiloh reshaped the war and how it's remembered today. When the smoke cleared on April 7, 1862, both sides were stunned by the unprecedented carnage. Over 23,000 men lay dead, wounded, or missing, a staggering number for the time, surpassing all previous American battles combined.
For the Union, Shiloh was a harsh wake-up call. Before the battle, many in the North thought the war would be short and relatively bloodless, a few decisive clashes and a quick victory. Shiloh shattered that illusion. Newspapers called it a slaughter pen and demanded accountability. Some even called for General Grant's removal, accusing him of being careless and unprepared.
But President Lincoln refused to remove Grant. He famously said, "I can't spare this man, he fights." That support allowed Grant to stay in command and continue his rise, ultimately leading to his victories at Vicksburg and, later, his appointment as commander of all Union armies.
For the Confederacy, the outcome was devastating. General Albert Sidney Johnston's death left a leadership vacuum in the Western theater. Many believed Johnston might have succeeded where others failed. His loss also hurt Confederate morale. And while Beauregard managed the retreat, he couldn't hold Corinth for long. Union forces eventually captured it, giving the North a strategic stronghold in Mississippi.
The scale of the casualties forced both sides to rethink tactics and strategy. Shiloh showed that even a successful surprise attack might not guarantee victory, and that holding ground was as important as seizing it. Grant learned the importance of entrenchments and defensive lines, lessons he'd carry with him through the rest of the war.
In terms of medical care, Shiloh also exposed the shocking lack of preparation. There were no formal ambulance services, and surgeons were overwhelmed by the sheer number of wounded. Some lay for days without treatment, their wounds infected, their water contaminated. That grim reality helped spur improvements in battlefield medicine later in the war, including better hospital organization and the eventual development of the ambulance corps.
And then there's how Shiloh is remembered today. The battlefield itself was preserved early on. Congress authorized the Shiloh National Military Park in 1894, making it one of the first Civil War battlefields to be protected. Today, visitors can walk the grounds where the fighting took place: the Hornet's Nest, the Peach Orchard, Pittsburgh Landing.
There are hundreds of monuments, one for nearly every regiment that fought, plus cannons and interpretive signs. Standing there, you can still sense the weight of what happened, the bravery, the terror, the sacrifice. And of course, the story of the angel's glow adds that touch of mystery, linking science to human resilience.
Shiloh's name comes from the Hebrew word for place of peace, but ironically, it became a place of unimaginable bloodshed. It taught America that this war would be a long and bitter struggle, and it forged a new understanding of what was at stake.
It's a place, and a battle, that deserves to be remembered, not just for the strategies and the generals, but for the people who fought there, and for the lessons they left behind.
The Battle of Shiloh was a turning point in the Civil War, a wake-up call that this conflict would be no picnic. It tested leaders like Grant and inspired legends like the angel's glow. It left a legacy of sacrifice that still resonates today.
Thanks for joining us on this journey back to 1862. If you enjoyed this episode, please give us a 5-star rating. It really helps the podcast grow and reach new listeners.
And don't forget to subscribe, share, and tell your history-loving friends. All our episodes are evergreen, so they stay relevant no matter when you listen.
We'd love to hear your topic suggestions. Hit us up on social media or drop us an email. Plus, check out our brand new merchandise. Links in the show notes.
Until next time, I'm Chuck.
And I'm Marco. Thanks for listening to the History AI podcast, where history comes alive.
In the Tennessee morning, 'neath the dogwood and pine, the blue coats were sleeping, no warning, no sign. At the break of the dawn came a thunderous sound, as the gray swept through timber and blood touched the ground. Oh, Shiloh, sweet Shiloh, where the church bell once rang, now echoes with rifles and cannonball clang. The fields ran with sorrow, the river with pain, and the ghosts of the fallen still whisper your name. General Johnston rode forward, his saber held high. He bled with his soldiers, then laid down to die. Grant stood by the river, his coat soaked with rain, said we'll lick 'em tomorrow through fire and pain. In the Hornet's nest hollow, the brave made their stand. With Wallace and Prentice, they held back the land. Their muskets went silent, surrounded, outflanked, but they bought time with honor, and for that they're thanked. Oh, Shiloh, dear Shiloh, where the tall grasses sway, we remember the thousands who fell that dark day. The peach trees still blossom, but blood's in the clay, and the wind hums the hymns that the dying would praise. Some wounds in the night began glowing with light, a soft sacred shimmer, so gentle, so bright. They called it God's mercy or angels at hand, a healing in horror none could understand. Now the cannons are silent, the guns lay to rest, but the names on the markers still pound in the chest. From the generals to privates who answered the call, they sleep now at Shiloh beneath springtime